So I see a lovely hoodie that says Pale Blue Dot. Recycle fleece product, vintage from 2021. Can you tell them about your fashion?
Yes, it's the last year's merge from Pale Blue Dot. We're a climate-focused venture fund based in Sweden, investing in Europe and in the US. Seed stage, usually tickets of €1 million.
Okay, so you wear the investor hat, and right, you're going to wear the moderator hat. What is this panel going to be about?
It's going to be about bridging the gap in early stage funding in the impact space.
Yes.
And we have 3 funds here from different geographies in Europe at different stages. And it's a discussion about where we have some gaps and what we can do to fix that as well.
Excellent. So now you can have a seat.
Amazing.
And then let's welcome up the panelists, and you should clap, please. Yes, come on up, people. Come on up.
Amazing. So with me on stage I have Sofia from Latitude59, all the way from Portugal, and Dama from Bethnal Ventures, all the way from London, and I'm from the south of Sweden. So we cover a few different geographies in Europe, and the discussion is going to be about bridging the gap in early stage funding in the impact space. But before we start, we could set a bit of the context by introducing ourselves a bit.
Yeah.
So do you want to start, Sofia?
Happy to start. So I'm an investor for Latitude59, which is an impact VC fund based in Portugal, but investing across Europe. So we are very focused in early stage. So we invest everywhere from 100K as a minimum ticket size up to 1 million. And our focus is in companies that are solving either an environmental or social problem. So what we look for is what we call the lockstep business models, which are companies where impact is actually driving the business. And this is really important for us because our own model as an impact fund is also very attached to impact. So we only receive our returns as fund managers, so our carry is dependent on the impact of our portfolio. So it's very important for us to keep track of impact KPIs for each of our portfolio companies because our own success will also be dependent on that. So very quickly, that's what MSM does.
And where do you invest in what geographies? Is it Portugal only or outside, full Europe? Or?
We invest across Europe. So we started investing through this fund in late 2019. So far we have close to 30 companies, so investing on average 1 company per month. And we cover all over Europe. Most of our portfolio is based currently across Portugal, UK, Germany, I would say are the 3 geographies where we have most of our portfolio companies currently based. But looking to change that and to go into other geographies, so happy to be here.
And now you're here, exactly. And Dama, could you do the same intro?
Yeah, so my name is Dama. I'm one of the partners of Bethnal Ventures. My pronouns are she, her. And for anyone who needs a visual description, I'm a brown woman dressed in black and wearing really big glasses. So I work at a fund which invests specifically in tech for good. And by tech for good, we mean backing founders who have really amazing ideas about tackling the really pressing social and environmental challenges of our lifetime. So climate emergency, looking into how we can maintain a sustainable planet, because it's the only planet with chocolate, so it matters. How we can contribute to a better society where we can reduce inequalities when it comes to education and wealth, but also contributing to healthy lives. And I would say we're really, really at the early stage spectrum of the early stage funding landscape. So we invest pre-product, pre-revenue, and help our founders go up to Series A.
Amazing. And that is in Europe as well? Or what's the limitation?
We have to because of the way we manage our funds, they have to be UK registered companies, but they can be operational anywhere in the world.
And what is really early stage? That means it is... tickets in pre-seed rounds, basically, or? Yeah,
so tickets we do. So we've existed for 10 years now and run an accelerator program. So ticket sizes ranging from 30 to 50K, and then do follow-on investments up to Series A, which is a ticket size roughly from 50 to 100K, with potentially more now because we've been acquired by a pension fund. But TBD, we can announce more news.
So you've been around for years. That means you have quite a few portfolio companies as well. How much is that?
10 years of investing, 166 companies we've invested in. Not all of them have made it, but we have a live portfolio of more than 100 companies, which is very exciting because we see more and more progression towards impact investment in specifically, and also more interest in purpose-driven founders who are looking to seek value-aligned investors as well. So more traditional VC getting into the impact space as well, which is quite interesting. And hopefully it's going to help us in our discussion about bridging the early stage gap.
I can just agree that we see the same thing in climate, that a lot of mainstream funds are moving into climate. In terms of even launching funds that are climate focused within under one umbrella of the fund, for example. So short about Pivot as well, we're a climate focused fund, usually pre-seed and seed, meaning leading rounds of €1 million, usually ticket size of €1 million, in rounds up to maybe 4 or 5 million. And for us, climate is very it's very wide. So that means it's not only carbon, it's biodiversity, it's pollution in oceans. We see it as a large problem, more on a planetary boundary way of looking at Earth, and less of carbon only, to just describe how we see climate investment. So that is super short about us. And going back to the theme of the discussion, we cover a few different areas and a few different sectors as well. Do you see a gap somewhere in early stage funding within impact investing or in the impact space, or in any sectors or verticals or any other way to slice it?
I think in terms of like a stage gap definitely exists. So a lot of money has been dragged into venture capital and into funding rounds in the past couple of years, but the amount going to pre-seed and seed rounds has been remaining pretty stable. So there's definitely a stage gap. I think in terms of impact versus not impact, I don't see a big gap. I do see that some sectors tend to struggle to raise from VCs, but I don't think that's particularly impact driven. So what I see is that like capital intensive businesses, like with longer R&D processes, take to step away from the VC routes. And that's definitely a gap that I think it's important to fill, because even if those companies are not raising from venture capital, there are definitely a lot of category defining ventures in those sectors where a lot of impact lies. So I think this financing gap for those businesses is definitely an important one to bridge.
I would agree for as well. There's a lot of climate companies we see that are amazing for the world, but maybe not fitting a venture scale outcome. But we still need funding for them to survive. And I think in the venture world, we're not so good at promoting other ways of building companies that are more less venture risk. And so I think there's something to improve on here for sure. And I fully agree on the pre-seed gap as well. I don't know if that has to do with fund sizes, like the abundance of money coming into venture and the fund sizes going up, and doing these early tickets for the funds that are so large might be one of the challenges that we've had. So fully agree.
There's definitely also a bit of an educational piece necessary, because it comes to, we're in the really lucky position that we get to back a lot of first-time entrepreneurs who have the lived experience of actually wanting to tackle really pressing social environmental problems. So founders who have no experience necessarily around how to build a profitable business or how to really merge impact and profit together. So that's why Bethnal Green Ventures runs the Accelerator program as well, and it's actually fit for purpose for those founders. But the really interesting thing is that, particularly at the pre-seed stages, when we first started out, we saw a significant gap when it came to those founders wanting to raise later stage investments, which is one of the reasons why we've now got our follow-on fund as well, but in order to help them bridge that particular gap when it comes to finding mid-stage capital. But it's slightly shifted in the past couple of years, and it's definitely also with the emergence of different new funds that are looking to invest more into sustainable activities, or particularly on the SFDR as well, when regulation comes into play, but also more and more shift from consumers themselves. So people want to put their money where their mouth is. They want to buy and purchase products and services that are purpose-driven as well. So not necessarily just ethical in terms of how they run their operations, but also seeking positive outcomes in the world. So that's quite a significant change that we've seen that is just now paired with how investors are switching gears as well towards more impact investment or ESG investing as well. But I think there's still a particular gap when it comes to access to capital. Not just based on do you have previous founder experience, but also when it comes to where do these funds sit, where are they geographically distributed, who can they invest in, and how they even find these investments as well. So warm introductions, sadly still a thing in VC, but definitely more and more opportunities available to actually invest into purpose-driven businesses.
I fully agree. If you look at the concentration of venture capital by city, for example, it follows the same power curve that most venture funding do. So that means, like in Europe, I guess London is number one. In the world, San Francisco is number one.
Yeah.
In Sweden, Stockholm is number one, and the second tier city in Stockholm has a tenth of the funding from Stockholm.
Yeah.
And it's quite sad that we have all these important problems within climate and impact, and the solutions to them are funded in a few places in the world, and that can't be the future of innovation.
Yeah.
Because then we're limiting the potential so much, I think.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we as investors kind of have a role in that sense. So to bridge that gap towards like being out there and being reachable to founders that are not in your network, so you would not have access other way. So I think we have like kind of a role to play in bridging this access gap and both being reachable for anyone that wants, but also to proactively going out there and trying to tap into those networks of founders. So for example, what we have been doing is trying to increase our efforts at the top of the funnel. So trying to define some KPIs and keep track of how many female founders we are reaching, how many diverse founders we are reaching, because if you keep within your networks, then you're kind of in this loop where, we always have access to the same type of founders and you don't see like the broader picture and everything else that it's out there. So I do think that investors, in the space have kind of a say and a way to kind of facilitate the...
Fully agree. Can I ask about, would you be okay sharing your numbers on the funnel? Like how does it look?
Yeah, I mean, for us, and I have to say, I think we are a bit lucky because I don't think it's just because of our efforts. I do think that, the impact space has been driving a lot of, female founders, diverse founders in. So for us, it really hasn't been a challenge to, keep up with the KPIs that we defined for ourselves. But I think with our most recent investment, we should be like, I think in between like 35 to 40% of female founders in our portfolio, which I'm very happy to say that 4 of them are like solo female founders. But as I mentioned, for us, the pipeline from female founders and diverse founders hasn't been an issue. Yeah. So I think it's a bit of our efforts in being reachable for them, but it's also part of, I think a lot of diverse talent and female founders are going to the impact space because they feel that the market is not providing the products they need and they are feeling a need for that. So I think they come up with solutions and that fits a lot with our impact mandate. So I do think that we have a good access to diverse founders for that.
Super.
Yeah, very happy to share numbers. We've also just published our impact report. So for anyone who wants to see more of an intersectional analysis as well, and like what is the proportion of Asian founders, for example, who then also go on to raise further investment, or what's the proportion of Black entrepreneurs who are also female who have received funding from BGV as well. So I highly recommend checking out our report. But we publish this data on an annual basis because we think it's really important for founders to also do their due diligence on us. Eventually, if they want us on their cap table, it matters to think about who you're enriching by the virtue of building a successful business. So really digging deeper into who your investors are on the cap table and where they get their money from as well. But in terms of what type of investments we've made or who we've invested in the last year, in 2021, we made 32 investments, 24 investments into new companies, and the rest were follow-on investments. And 22p of every pound invested went into female-founded teams, and around 40p of every pound invested into mixed-gender teams. So we're highly sort of looking into the composition of the management teams and the founding teams as well when we make our investment decisions. And luckily, we sort of have the same thing. We don't see a problem in a pipeline. There's no pipeline problem. There is loads and loads of amazing talent out there. It's just about making yourself a bit more approachable and accessible to founders to actually find you as well.
Amazing. And just to follow up, I share my numbers as well. On 22 investments, we are slightly over 30% of the founders are female, and 42% of the companies have a female co-founder, I think.
Yeah.
And so that means looking at the impact space or the climate space, it looks like it's slightly better than some other sectors in venture where you see numbers that are amazingly sad.
Yeah.
So maybe the gap in this space is not as large compared to the rest of the venture scene.
Yeah, I would say so, but I also think it's largely down to the communities that are affected by the problems that we want founders to solve are disadvantaged communities, come from marginalized communities, are largely people who are bearing the brunt of the climate crisis, for example, or are extensively affected by the inequalities that exist in the world. So there's more incentive, personally, that's just my subjective view, for people to actually want to change something and to change the status quo and to really ensure that we are tackling problems that need tackling and not just solving problems for the ones and the things that really... We don't need more grocery services that deliver your arrabbiata sauce in less than 10 minutes. I cannot stress this enough. I do not want to see more investment going into that space. I really think we need to shift gears and really think about what do we actually need to tackle in order to ensure that we are continuing to live equitably and in an equitable society as well.
I fully agree, and hopefully the gap for funding in the 10-minute delivery space might be here again when the venture scene is turning a bit and thinking about the latest weeks of struggles. So in terms of we see some kind of gap in pre-seed, we see some gap in access as well, depending on where you are geography, and also in terms of network. If you're a first-time founder, maybe you are a researcher, for example, you might not be connected to venture.
Yeah.
What are some solutions if you are a founder? How do you bridge this gap?
Yeah, I think Dama is in a very good position to talk about how accelerator programs and angel networks and all of those programs more focused in early stage have been changing the impact scene. So we are starting to see a lot of second-time, third-time founders in the impact space, starting to build smaller angel vehicles or even smaller funds and driving a lot of investing towards the impact scene, which I think it has been very interesting how the impact network has been pushing impact investing forward. And I think accelerators are a good way to do that. So they some of them give financing, others don't, but I think the biggest value proposition is the network that they put in front of founders. So they connect you with the people that will help you build your business forward, even if that's investing or product development, growth, whatever it is, even corporate introductions. We in MSM we have an impact accelerator which is called MazeX, and Dama can also talk a little bit about Bethnal Green Ventures program. But I think those are definitely changing the impact scene.
That is, I fully agree. If you would mention a few competitors as well for the founders here, which one would you recommend? There's tons of accelerators. You will find them in different places. Would you recommend some other ones in Europe, for example, that you are impressed by?
Yeah, this is the weird thing about being in this space. I wouldn't necessarily call them competitors, because ultimately what we all want to see are products and services that are positively impacting millions and millions of lives. So I'm happy to recommend people to MazeX, for example, particularly the Ocean Accelerator. That's a really, really cool accelerator program. And then there are different programs in the Nordics as well around Catapult, who invest also have an ocean accelerator, but also have a specific accelerator in focused on the African continent. There's Norken or Norsken.
Swedish word, exactly.
Yeah.
Hard to pronounce. Norken.
Who also have an amazing impact space and house, co-working space in Sweden, and obviously Bethnal Green Ventures. We've been around for 10 years now, so we have really solidified how we can best support entrepreneurs on this journey as well, particularly also putting in guardrails for founders themselves so they can ensure that they're seeking out value-aligned investors who both care about profits but also the impact that you're trying to achieve. And the virtue of these type of programs is really that it opens up access to the knowledge on how to navigate the really murky world of VC. And obviously outside of accelerator programs, there are amazing resources available from sort of tech stars who have published their venture deals book now as a free educational online program. So you can literally learn how to do VC as a founder doing these type of courses as well, which is really, really cool.
What would be the best way to know if an accelerator is a good fit for you as a founder? Like, what's the DD process? Because there's a few to pick from. Like, what should you do?
Yeah, I mean, the process for us is quite. I will have to say is quite subjective because it's so early stage. Because oftentimes at this stage, then people don't have enough validation for will this actually work, especially if they don't have a prototype yet or don't have an MVP, because we see quite a lot of people who are just at the stage of, I have this brilliant idea and now I need money to actually do something about this. But the really interesting thing is that people do have a better understanding of wanting to measure impact effectively, and that's one of the sort of key aspects of our program as well. It's like a 2-week sprint on impact measurement, but also thinking about how do you actually address some of the unintended consequences that come from tech development, and how do you really focus on responsible product design? How do you ensure that you're not using shitty dark patterns in your software development or in your mobile app that just continue to contribute to screen addiction or to massive disinformation, misinformation like other big tech platforms have done. So it's really fascinating to actually work with founders at that particular stage. But we sort of try to start out with alignment to the SDGs, and then sort of with our impact investment thesis, and then sort of take it from there.
And question to both of you: do you measure impact on a fund level or on a startup level?
For us, so we start measuring on a venture level. Yeah. So what we do is part of our process is when we invest in a company, in terms of like external communication, we put like a one-pager out there explaining like what is the impact of the company, what did we see, like who are the beneficials, what is the impact, like how big is it? And then more on an internal basis with the founders, we define a couple of KPIs that we want to keep track of, and we define metrics for those KPIs in the next couple of years. So this is in a venture level. At a portfolio level, we do measure the whole portfolio and how far is the overall portfolio from the KPIs that we define for each venture. And that, as I was mentioning before, that's very important because our carry is impacted because of that. So we do measure in both ways. So more specifically about the venture, but that also dictates overall our portfolio impact as well.
I mean, question back to you as well. How do you do it at Pale Blue Dot?
We don't have any fund level measurement right now, and we're thinking about the pros and cons of adding that. Yeah. So right now we track climate KPIs per company, and that is individual and does not have to be carbon like a lot of climate funds. So it could be something else. So it is the founders themselves who set up what they think is their impact, and they track that. And that is something that is related to it is something that's close to building, scaling your company. So this scales when if the company becomes a $1 billion company, this metric will also be very large. Yeah. So that's how we do it internally, Pale right now.
I think one thing that we do, which is quite difficult for founders at the early stage, but the more we see their sort of trajectory from like ideation to like Series A, and it's hugely fascinating to see them improve on their impact measurement as well. But it continuously also goes into asking about attribution. So can you tell us what sort of baseline data you have that's specifically for the founders, to then show what is the transformational change that you've actually achieved over time as well, particularly when it comes to systems change theories and more behavioral change as well. And one of the sort of things we tell our founders as well, it's like no one line of inquiry is actually going to give you the whole picture. So ultimately, across the fund level, we say that our portfolio ventures have improved the lives of 13 million people in the last year, which is great. But from those 13 million people, some of them are refugees, some of them are internally displaced people, so the depth of impact is much, much bigger for people who are marginalized, for actually enabling them to access employment opportunities. So a chatterbox in that example that we share. And it's just hugely fascinating to sort of see founders really think about it. Okay, so how can I actually communicate my impact better, and not just only to retain top talent into your company, but also to drive more impact in the world. And it's such a joy working in this space.
I fully agree. It's like trying to reduce all of that to one number, remove so much of information and so much of the value as well. Fully agree. And in the latest, like, one more gap that we could have in this space is the next 2 years, to be honest. So the last month has been pretty sad in the venture industry. There's been probably on the other side of the spectrum where we are as funds, I would say, like the latest stage US funds has been very vocal about the state of the market, and we've seen a few signals in Europe, but not as much. From your perspective, where you are, have you seen anything in terms of a slowdown? Are you reacting as funds right now?
I mean, to be honest, in early stage, so pre-seed and seed, in terms of structure of the rounds, I haven't seen yet. I know that it's happening more in later stages, like Series A onwards. So I know that rounds are taking longer to happen. Like funds are going into like more in-depth DD processes, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I know rounds are taking longer to happen. I think like it will naturally come to early stage. So I think it will be normal to see portfolio companies, starting to struggle to raise Series A like as fast as they would imagine to be doing that. So I do think that we will see consequences of that. In terms of like advising of our companies, I think like all the founders should, plan a little bit what the next 2 years will look like and plan like fundraising according to that. And I think it's very important to bear in mind that there are other sources of financing that can keep you out there and alive for a little bit longer until you get to those thresholds for Series A rounds, which the threshold is definitely going to increase. So you have the likes of, government grants for R&D and product development, you have revenue-based financing, you have venture debt. So I think founders that can navigate this financing world apart from dilutive equity will be in a very good position to have a little bit more space to breathe until they get to the traction that they need to raise like good Series A and Series B and later stage rounds.
And do you think the impact space or the climate space will be equally affected as the 10-minute delivery scene, for example?
I feel like this might be because I'm in a filter bubble, but I feel like left, right, and center there's a new impact VC or a new climate tech fund being announced, and more funds also emerging to look into to invest into underrepresented founders, which is quite great. So to a large degree, I feel like there's more access to capital, but what really needs to shift is enabling access to capital a lot easier. So really thinking about how to respond to founders where they might not have the networks to ask their pal who went to university together to make an introduction, but rather be open about meeting founders from all walks of life, really. But the interesting thing is, with climate tech, because there's been such a surge in investments going into the space, and obviously in the past decades we've also seen a surge going into clean tech, which was the previous version of this. So I hope that we learn from what's happened in the past, particularly when it comes around recessions and financial downturns as well, and helping founders to stay more resilient and really look into how can we help you to actually generate revenue rather than having to go raise funding time and time again, particularly if you're consumer focused as well and spend all your money on ads. But yeah, I think there's loads of value-aligned investors in the space who are helpful and who are doing the right things.
I think from our perspective, we're continuing with the same cadence, the same investment speed as we have done before. And our thesis is basically that climate is something that we need.
Yeah.
It's not nice to have. It's something that we need to fix. And I think the risk of that being affected is actually less, since it's real problems and less of the new things that we're seeing as well.
Yeah.
And to end this on a good note, like, and not talk about the challenges we have, like, what are some sectors that you love or interested in, that you would love to see more startups in? Where are you looking right now, for example?
For us, is a couple of them, but I've been particularly interested about the education space and companies like powering the shift from an institution and state-owned education system to a more like learner-focused and consumer-focused like learning tools. So that's an area that I have been looking quite a bit. And apart from that, still in the education sector, also companies that have been financing these new education trends and education companies. So the likes of income share agreement companies, where we've done one investment where the incentives between students and the education institutions are pretty aligned. That's also something we've been looking quite actively at.
Personally, climate, sustainability, but I'll leave that to you. I'm really interested in seeing more people working on solutions to shape a fair future of work. So how can we provide better access to decent and fair work, and how can we reduce the inequalities that exist in the space as well?
Amazing. And I guess I will do the same comment. Within climate, I think biodiversity is the main area which is so underinvested and so underappreciated today in society. I think that's going to be a huge area for improvements in the coming years. So that is something we look at quite deeply within Bethnal Africa. And to connect this a bit to access, what is the best way to reach you? Like if there's founders in the audience who wants to reach you and they have an invention within EdTech, for example.
Yeah, so for us, if it's for funding purposes, if you just go to our website, like msm.vc, you'll find there like a form that you can fill in, put your info there, and we'll get back to you. If it's for networking, I mean, feel free to reach out to me. Like on LinkedIn, I do have a link where you can schedule a 15 minutes conversation with me, so you can go directly there, and I'll be happy to chat.
You'll be inundated with requests now. The best way is bethnalgreenventures.com/apply if you want to apply for funding. I'm on Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm happy to respond to any requests on there in due time.
And same for us, all the emails are on the website. We respond to every email, so just check the website and reach out if within climate.
Great.
Amazing. So I think we're done with the panel. Should we take any questions from the audience, or what's the next step here?
I think we're pretty much out of time, but we can check with the organization if we have time for that.
Check. We're on. It's your show. You do what you want. But does anyone have a question while we got them? Come on. Yes. You ask a question, I'll repeat it because you don't have a microphone. Go again. There's a microphone coming. But let's make it a quick question and a quick answer.
I have a question to Dama. Why would a pension fund acquire an impact fund?
Because, good question. And I hope there will be more pension funds who are shifting gears. But we've seen that there's quite a different notion when it comes to fiduciary duty, because obviously pension funds usually want to maximize returns for the contributions of every single individual who pays into a pension. But now it also emerges that people are asking themselves, what world do we want to retire into? So there's a significant shift to actually tackling the pressing challenges of our lifetime. And that's so we're hoping that with the acquisition of a venture capital fund, we can actually show that we can invest early into amazing solutions that long-term can have huge positive impact on people and planet.
I have to follow up a bit and say we have an LP as well, which is a pension fund, but then we have an investment as well, which is helping pension funds move money into non-oil / green resources.
Yes.
And I think it's the future of pension as well, because moving a large amount of money to something that is better is so important. So I think it is the future of pension funds.
Great question.
Excellent. All right. So thank you very much for being here. Let's give them all a big round of applause. Yes.